Okay, I'm going to try to address a few more comments very quickly. Uh, let's make them a bit bigger. Mithcoriels says, and you hear, and if you hear of someone who's been sleeping with animals, how would you go about figuring out if it was consensual or not? Well, if you're talking from a philosophical viewpoint, and I don't think you are, but if you are, then I think a more useful question would be the Velveteen Rabbit, right? The rocking horse character in the Velveteen Rabbit, who at one point was loved so much that he came to life and for some nonsensical reason didn't escape, um, like the Velveteen Rabbit did. You know, what if, the boy grew up to, be a teenager and, he was exploring himself sexually, decided to experiment by making a hole in the back of this rocking horse and having sex with this rocking horse. According to the logic of the story, the rocking horse is alive and certainly can't get away or anything like that, and doesn't strike me as a sort of character that would appreciate something like that happening to him. But at the same time, it's a fucking toy. But to the boy, at least at one point, the rocking horse was alive, and I've also had fun with, can women consent? But that's philosophical. I think you're talking like literally, and that's a bit of a problem because you say if you hear about someone who's been sleeping with animals, and that's anthropomizing the issue a little too much. I mean, I will admit that I am the sort of person that would happily, if I had a horse that I was particularly close to, I would happily sleep in a stable, with the horse if I was, if it didn't disturb the horse. But, really, zoophilic relationships are a different kettle of ball games to non-zoophilic relationships, in the same way that gay relationships are slightly different to heterosexual relationships, and then lesbian relationships are slightly different to male homosexual relationships, in accordance to like the physical differences mostly. And of course that seeps into things like gay marriage issues and blinking at one point a different age of consent and all that kind of thing. At one point it was illegal to be gay altogether. But yeah, in the case of, lesbian, gay and heterosexual, there's not a lot of difference. But there is a lot of difference between, having, being sexually attracted to humans and being sexually attracted to dogs. And having sexual relationships with dogs and having sexual relationships with humans. To say we sleep with dogs is to say like we marry our dogs and have that kind of human relationship, which isn't the case. It's more like we sort of become the dog to a large extent. I mean, we have to meet, don't we? In a heterosexual relationship as well, the two parties kind of have to meet somewhere. And usually in a zoophilic relationship, we sort of become, the human sort of becomes the animal. more than anything else. You know, to the extent where I can't even perform with a human, not through lack of trying, but I can't perform with a human unless they're in a doggy position. In which case I can just about do it, you know, but I have to have, you know, I have to sort of become the dog or become the animal for it to work within myself, if that makes any sense. But to answer your question, you know, I think I have already answered it. You know, animal abuse is fairly simple to detect. You know, if the animal looks beaten or half starved or something, you know, that's an alarm bell. And in the case of sexual abuse, you know, if the genitalia area, you know, looks sore and damaged and all that sort of thing, you know, that's a pretty obvious sign, I would say. And if the animal gets, you know, really kind of iffy when your hand goes anywhere near their tail area, you know, that would be another sign that the animal is being or has been sexually abused. My aunt had a couple of dogs who were breeders. They were kept in like a confined area, and they were just kept, you know, they were made to breed probably more than, you know, the bitch in particular was made to breed probably more than she naturally should. And when she reached the end of her usefulness, in that area, and then her puppies were sold for money, I guess. You know, and when she reached the end of her usefulness, she was sold to my aunt as a pet, and you know, they, you know, very obviously acted like dogs that hadn't been looked after too well. You know, they're very jumpy, very sort of unpredictable, and yes, if you touch them in even vaguely the wrong way, you know, not that I ever tried or anything like that, but if you know, if you touch the back half of their, you know, if you're stroking them and your hand went too far to the extent where it went, you know, past the halfway line, you know, on their backs, you know, they start barking and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, there's also a, you know, sort of debate that mithcoriels was a part of, and in that debate she says, if an animal actually mounts a human, I'd say that that's given consent. Arguably, also, if he stands there and doesn't walk away, letting the human mount it. But of course, consent isn't enough to not consider it rape. We assume that the animal isn't intelligent enough to know what's going on so it's like a mentally ill or underage person. No, it's not. And at this juncture, I would recommend that you go to the video responses section of you know, of the Magic Sandwich show in question, and take a look at Ario Kilpatrick's response to Aaron Ra, because you know, he really does a good job at explaining this sort of thing. It's all about equality versus equivalence, and I'm going to respond to that video with my own 2 cents at some point. But you know, his video is very good, and I suggest you watch that. To be honest, but no. First of all, this mentally ill thing, like the person would have to be extremely mentally ill. I mean, we used to say, at least in this damn country, that it was immoral to, you know, have sex with a physically disabled person, you know, and then by extension, it was immoral for a disabled person to have sex, which, you know, resulted in all kinds of protests and things like this. I think the song Spasticus Autisticus came from that. But mentally, I mean, if you suffer from mild depression or like if you have Asperger's syndrome or anything like that, arguably that sort of, you know, you're in that kind of hemisphere of mental illness, and you know, some of those people like to shag. You know, if you're going to talk about people who are completely wheelchair bound, they don't have the power of speech, you know, low functioning autistic people, or people with, you know, the higher level of Down syndrome, I guess. I don't know much about that particular illness, but yeah. So in that case, I suppose it is similar to, you know, the mentally ill person in that it's bullshit, but basically what you're arguing is, you know, somebody said animals can't consent, and that was debunked, and now you're saying that animals can't give informed consent. Well, they can. You know, and what you're saying is because the animals, you know, apparently have like the mental capacity of a 4-year-old, that means they are like 4. No, they are sexually mature. You know, and when it comes to like bestiality sex, you know, sex of a human, the only thing that really matters is, you know, do I want this? Do I want this at this particular moment in time? And that's it. It's pretty much, you know, as simple as throwing a ball for the, you know, and then, you know, the dog catches the ball, or sitting on the horse and having the horse gallop, or, you know, anything of that nature. You know, all this sociology stuff that comes from the idea that you know, before contraceptives and before we understood about STDs and where they came from and so on and so forth, you know, having sex was like a life change, and especially heterosexual sex, which is, you know, was pretty much the only thing that was acceptable for a long time. It was like a life changing thing. So, you know, it kind of made sense to have all of these strict rules, you know, such as no sex before marriage. and all of that sort of thing. But now we've evolved, now we've got all these contraceptives, and we know what we're doing. And casual sex has become, a norm. We don't need all of these, all of these rules which, all of these ideas like that sex is sleazy, that sex should only be constrained to the bedroom, that sex should be romantic, and all of this sort of thing. And somebody who likes enjoys sex too much as a pervert, and perversion is bad, and all of this kind of thing. We don't need that anymore, and we certainly don't need that when it comes to animals, because those risks simply don't exist. I mean, STDs exist to a degree, but only to a very small degree, and pregnancy and things like that is right out. It's just it really is just sex for pleasure, much like homosexual sex is. And so, an animal has more than enough capacity to give informed consent for the action of a human having sex with them. I mean, more than enough. And then Alusky talks about that. And you say it is also not statutory rape for two underage kids to sleep with one another. Well, no shit, it's not. We have to draw the line somewhere. Or would you like it if a person raped an animal in an abusive way against their will? And we can't distinguish well enough between that and the case where an animal consenting calls the animal. Oh, because the animal can't go to the police or explain their situation exactly. So it's safer to outlaw all of it. There's a couple of things here. First of all, I mean, I would not agree with this. I love animals. I'm a vegetarian. I'm sitting on the fence when it comes to riding stables and what goes on there. I absolutely love animals, and I think I'm speaking for most zoo, certainly zoophiles and zoosexuals, particularly the ones, that I've seen being vocal on YouTube anyway. But I have seen a picture, like a drawing of a contraption which I assume at one time existed, like hundreds of years ago, when bestiality was sort of considered more acceptable, where a pig was suspended on a sort of especially built wooden frame in such a way that a man could stand behind the pig and have his evil way with the pig. And to be honest, kind of a turn on, but I would never in reality advocate such a thing. I think it would be awful. However, according to the way we treat our animals, there's little reason why we shouldn't do that sort of thing. Maybe not exactly that, but there's no reason why we shouldn't breed animals, especially so people can sort of pay to have sex with them. There's no reason why we shouldn't have these adult petting zoos where you go in and you're completely naked and you can sort of interact with the animals. There's no reason why you can't have like a stables where you pay 50 quid and a horse is dragged into a sort of contraption similar to a milking station, whatever you call them, and constrained, and then you pay 50 quid and you get half an hour of this horse, to have sex with this horse. There's no, if we did that sort of thing, it would be entirely consistent, with the way we in fact treat animals in pretty much every other field. As long as the animal wasn't being hurt, physically hurt, physically damaged and all that sort of thing, then, I kind of don't see any problem whatsoever with it. I do see problems with it, but I don't see any difference between that and the way, we consider it acceptable to treat animals. But and the second thing, which I think I've been over, is animals can't go to the police or something, but we can protect animals. We have the RSPCA, we have PETA, and we have all this, these animal charities. We have all these vets, we have all these people we can go to if we witness an animal being abused or abandoned, or mistreated in any way, shape or form. I mean, these instances where these people are caught, and in their house they've got like these cages that are just cram-packed full of dogs, and they're arrested and the dogs are sorted out. The dogs don't have to come up on the court stand and say, oh yeah, it was fucking awful, this is what happened. No, that's not how we it's not how we think about our relationship with animals. And even the most loving zoophile animal lover out there, I think, would agree that that's not how we sort of interact with animals. Even your horse whisperers and think people like that, I'm not sure if the character of Dr. Dolittle would, say that this is how we, sort of interact with animals. We see animals being abused and hurt and, messed around with, and then we deal with it. And in the case of loving zoophilic sexual relationships, to be frank, I mean, you go to any riding stables, you go to any field where there's sheep or cows or anything like that, you go to, you see any stranger walking their dog, and they could be fucking their animals and you wouldn't bloody know it at all. And maybe a zoo could tell somehow, but I'm not even sure about that. But you wouldn't know. It's just a part of life. Sex is a part of life. Once you strip it of all of this social crap which you're lumping onto the animal for some reason, once you get rid of all this social crap, as well as the necessities of safe sex and all that kind of thing, Yeah, at the end of the day, sex is just a part of nature, and there's no reason why we shouldn't celebrate the wonders of sex with nature.